Well, the thing many fans have been calling for a while finally happened, and that's Acme being out with the Chicago Bulls. We got to talk about the press conference from Michael Reinsdorf, and the question that I'm left with this is, did they really fix anything? And I know a lot of people are going to comment to that with, no, the ownership's still there, but we're going to break down the press conference. You already had a live reaction to it. We're going to break that down, the future Billy Donovan, and what this so-called new era is officially already off to a shaky start. We'll talk about all that plus more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go and get into this content for today, y'all. I want to start off with this one. So we know that the Acme era is over, and one thing that the Michael Reinsdorf press conference proved is that this was something that was brewing for a while. This is not just a reaction to the Jaden Ivey situation. This is even just a reaction to the trade deadline and trading Kobe and Ayo, which I know a lot of people are like, oh, I know trading Ayo was the last step. Because if you're trusting Michael Reinsdorf based off his words, he actually kind of was complimentary towards AK for the moves at the trade deadline and trading Kobe and Ayo and clearing out the roster a little bit. But I want to be clear on this one, right? Is that it looked like the timing of everything is really what pushed this over. Michael Reinsdorf talked very much so about how he felt because of the first round pick, because of the cap space, because of the roster flexibility, because of, not having really bad contracts, that this was the perfect time to move on and have somebody else come in. Now, that is basically what I've been saying too, and that's not even to toot my own horn. I think it just makes sense, right? You want typically new front office people come in and they have to unclog the mess. And not to say that there isn't a mess still here, right? But they have to unclog the mess, whether that is bad long-term contracts, whether that's lack of assets or draft capital or even cap space because of decisions made by the prior regime. Like AK had to do that. AK came in. Keep in mind that first offseason where he signed, it was the second offseason where he signed Lonzo and Alex Caruso and DeMar. We had no cap space, which was part of the reason we had to give up first-round picks for DeMar, multiple for Nikola Vucevic, and even give up something for Lonzo as well. That's why they were committed as signing trades. We signed Caruso with our mid-level exception, if I'm not mistaken, but that's why the Bulls had to do that, right? So the question now becomes, yes, you can optically talk about it a lot. I think, Michael and talking about how much, they really wanted somebody who's actually a communicator and how they haven't had the best communicators in that position and addressing the media. That's going to be something that's important to them. That's really good to hear. But it seemed like it was the timing on top of the situation, right? And so is this more damage control or is it true accountability, right? That's the question that's left for a lot of people after Michael Reinsdorf's press conference. And I think it could be both, right? I do think Michael came off as very much so taking accountability for where the Bulls are. Now, you can take accountability and still not change stuff, right? You can take accountability and still kind of be caught in the weeds. But for what it's worth, Michael Reinsdorf got in front of it and he did take accountability, saying that the things that he has to be better. And it would have been very easy to come out and basically blame every single thing on AK and just say, we weren't with this, but no. Michael said, listen, I got to identify the gaps in my process as well. And so there's that of it, right? So when you look at it, right, the apology to Bulls fans, the accountability comments, that's great, right? And I love that he emphasized stability over quick fixes. The comment that he made of, we want to win, and we always want to win, but we want to win if it's sustainable. And that's something that can easily be overlooked as just corporate speak, but it makes sense, right? Like when you build something that's winning, the thing that most of us go to, right, that talk about this team every day is that what is sustainable. I will remember forever my first year of doing this show. It was the first year of Lonzo and DeMar being here, and when we were on that long winning streak, we were somewhere in the middle of that, and I literally said on a live stream after a game, hey, we won this game, but if we keep playing this way, we're not going to win a lot of these games. And at that time, the reaction from Bulls fans, again, because Bulls fans we didn't have something like that for a long time, right? Was, I'm confused. Did we win or did we not? Why are we talking about the negatives? Because again, you have to pick out what's sustainable and what's not. Just because you're winning, it doesn't mean it's sustainable. And so what Michael Reinsdorf, I feel like, shined a light on in this is that, while they felt like, okay, maybe that Lonzo and DeMar and Zach team could be something to build with before Lonzo went down, they never really felt like that version of the team was going to be able to win in a sustainable fashion. That's also what Billy Donovan said over that stretch as well, right? So, again, same message. And I do think there needs to be that. Does it come off a little bit like PR talk? Yeah, absolutely it does. And I don't think you're going to run into a situation like this, especially for somebody like Michael, who's never really addressed the media head on. Yes, he had to look at his notes and stuff like that, but he was very succinct in what he wanted to say. And I can honestly say, even in the parts that I don't agree with his stance, I can say that he was very forthcoming and very succinct in making those points. And so I do think that this isn't just PR talk. I think that this is legitimately where his head's at, but that doesn't mean that there's not some concerns with where his head's at, right? For example, the strong Billy Donovan endorsement. The fact of saying, hey, if we interview a candidate and they come in and they're not interested in keeping Billy a Hall of Fame coach, if Billy wants to stay, then it's probably not the person for us. That is going to be the part that echoes throughout most conversations based off this press conference. And like I said on the live stream, right, that isn't about whether Billy's good or not. People so much want to make the conversation on if Billy's good or not. Let's just take that out of the equation for this. It's not just about that. It's about the fact that I don't feel like you learned the right lesson in that. And that is the sense that if you hire somebody as your president, as your GM, and you hire them because the vision they have for the team, let them execute their vision. Don't already start off with one hand tied behind their back, basically saying you cannot take this job if you don't want to keep Billy. Because what if their vision, what if their play style for the team doesn't include something that's in Billy's skill set? And again, this isn't about Billy being good or not at this part of the conversation. It's really just about how much, so if you had a candidate who had a great vision, you listen to their pitch, you listen to their plans, and you feel like it's a great vision. And then they say, well, but part of that vision is I want Taylor Jenkins as a head coach, or I want a coach that runs a more up-tempo XYZ style, more defensive oriented, and I have a guy in mind for that. And the Reinsdorf was like, oh, okay, interview over. Thank you very much. Like, that's the part that's concerning for me, right? And the limitations that potentially places on somebody that could actually want to come to this job and have a good vision on what they want to do with the team. And that's the part of it that is still like the Reinsdorf's not learning the right lesson. You would think that they would have learned because they wanted AK to keep Jim Boylan when AK came on. They hired Billy Donovan. AK looked at them and said, I hear you on that, but no. Fired Jim Boylan, hired Billy Donovan, and the Reinsdorfs absolutely love Billy Donovan. So you were holding on to somebody that, again, you were familiar with, that you had a relationship with, and instead the new front office came in. Now, maybe that's part of the reason. And hold myself accountable. Maybe they looked at that and said, we didn't stick to our guns. We didn't make AK keep Jim Boylan. And so now with this next phase, no, we have identified Billy Donovan as our guy, and you have to keep Billy Donovan on for this team. And, it is what it is if that's the lesson that they learned from that. I don't think that's the right lesson taken from that, but if that's what they want to do. On top of that, right, Michael talking about the structure of the team, being willing to change that a little bit, not have the same structure as a president. They could just go a GM and a bunch of assistant GMs, talking a lot about that. And I do think that when you see that not every team has the same structure, right? For example, the Denver Nuggets created a president of basketball operations position so that they could promote AK to GM while he was there to mean that a team could only snatch him or poach him away if they were giving him a president role. So maybe the Bulls want to do that too. Maybe they want to leave in that a little bit. Hire somebody as the GM, not have a president, and then see how that guy does. And then if that guy starts working out, which is that when people are going to start looking and say, damn, that guy over in Chicago is doing some work, we can hire him as a president, then you have the forward mobility to say, okay, we're going to actually make a new role. We're going to give you the president role so that way people can't poach you and hire a new GM. So there is some forward thinking in that. They did talk about working with a firm to kind of go over candidates and hire and stuff like that. People have reacted to the Paxton involvement from that. John Paxson is still going to be involved, which is neither here nor there if you're bringing in an independent firm to me personally. but I can definitely understand why that's concerning because, again, part of the problem with the Reinsdorfs is they go back to what they know. They stay in the family, right? Those type of things. And that's just a reality part of this that you have to look at. Now, as far as the Billy Donovan part, right? I know a lot, and I said a lot's going to be made about that quote from Michael Reinsdorf as far as Billy, people they interview, wanting to keep Billy on, all that type of stuff. I'll take away this from that, right? Billy is still left to make his decision at the end of the season. This season ends on Sunday. We could very well have a decision from Billy Donovan on Monday, right? Now, and I have to be straightforward in this. I think the UNC stuff popped up, and then, of course, because Billy Donovan was linked to UNC, that's basically what the conversation focused on. I think we have to remember that the initial talk of Billy Donovan stepping away from this team was long before the UNC stuff started popping up. The UNC stuff came afterwards. The initial reason we heard Billy Donovan could step away is because the loss of his father, the loss of his mother-in-law, and wanting to take some time with his family to then decide what he wants from the position, right? So there is still a world where Billy Donovan saves the Reinsdorfs from themselves in a sense and looks at it and says, and this was posted as well by Casey Johnson saying that the plan is still at the end of the season for Billy Donovan to sit down, talk with the Reinsdorfs, and based off how he feels about the plan, then he's going to make his decision on whether the Chicago Bulls are for him or not. And I respect that, right? He still deserves that part of it. Now, I can't remember who did it. Somebody retweeted that was with the OKC Thunder and said, hey, basically, this is word for word what Billy Donovan said before his meeting with the OKC Thunder owners, and then he ultimately walked away. So there still is that runway there that Billy Donovan could choose to walk away. He can have that conversation with the Reinsdorfs. They can tell him on the plan. They can tell him on it. Even if he still does advise on that, he could still walk away and say, listen, I heard them. I love them. The Reinsdorfs did a lot for me, but this situation still isn't necessarily for me, and I just need to take a break, see what I want to do. I don't want to deal with this crap. And that's very well what could happen here. So I want to be clear. You could still very well see Billy Donovan walk away and hopefully save the Bulls from themselves and then have to move on to a new head coaching search as well. And again, like I said, this is nothing to do with how good Billy Donovan is or not. This is strictly to do with what the precedence that sets for somebody who can come in and take the job. I made the analogy and said this. If you're already coming into a job interview and they're basically telling you that somebody who's going to work for you, you can't fire, then let's say what in the back of your mind, with that not being there a year or two later, let's say you're not happy with the coaching performance of Billy Donovan, or you just want something different. Now you're already going to start in the back of your mind like, damn, well, this is ownership's guy. The moment that I raise some concerns or say that I want to fire him, does that start the timeline on my job? Does that start tension between me and ownership? And that's just a barrier that you don't have to have in this search that the Bulls are creating. But, it is what it is. At the end of the day, the Bulls, it's out of any of our control what the Bulls do in regards to that. But, hey, Billy Donovan did thank Artūras and Marc Eversley for bringing him to Chicago. He talks about how much he valued his relationship with ownership, and then said that next Monday's meeting, which now we know a date, so the season ends on Sunday, the meeting is going to be Monday. He said that he needs to see a path plan forward before making his decision. And the direct quote is this: I want to win at a high level. I think the organization deserves that. So, and that's the quote that the person from the OKC Thunder, again, I don't remember the name, I apologize for that, that used to cover the Thunder, said that's basically the exact same thing that he heard from Billy Donovan before Billy Donovan ultimately decided to walk away. Oh, it's Chris Mannix. There you go. Chris Mannix says, this is almost verbatim what Billy told me in the bubble after his last season within OKC. So take that for what you will. Right? Maybe Billy Donovan once again saves the Bulls from themselves. But here's the thing, right? So then the part that about the structure of the team, right? So with Michael Reinsdorf also saying that, they feel like they have the cap space. They have, decisions to make. They want to, avoid the mistakes of the past of signing aging vets, right? Talked about part of the reason why the doubt was on that Zach LaVine team is how old that team was. You had DeMar, you had Vooch, over 30. Yeah, you had younger players like LaVine and Lonzo, but that's part of the reason that they felt that it wasn't as sustainable. And so now it seems like they want to have they understand the importance of patience and development, right? Not to jumpstart things. They still do want to win. And still reportedly, they don't necessarily want to tank. And that's the reality of it. Even though that quote that came out from AK and Marc Eversley basically saying that they felt that their hands were tied to a degree, because ownership didn't want to tank. When we've directly heard AK talk about not taking, like almost anytime the word tank came up, you see AK's eyes glaze over in any interview. But, listen to this from Mike. And I said this. A lot of Bulls fans thought that with the tank, and they said that, this is going to be a multi-year tank job. It's not. And, even with, Michael Reinsdorf mentioning the new tanking rules and how that can change. I'm not saying that this team isn't going to be bad, but it seems like, based off what Michael Reinsdorf said, is that they do want somebody who could hit the ground running, have a plan to get this team back to winning as soon as possible. That's kind of what I already thought the plan was going to be if AK had stayed on. It seems like that's the plan that ownership wants to see as well from whoever that they come in. They just didn't want AK being the one to guide that path forward because they didn't trust the path and the vision that he had. But it does seem like they do want to get back. They want to take Montes Buzelis. They want to take Giddey. By the way, the comment of Michael Reinsdorf saying that they were a Giddey shot away from Cooper Flagg is crazy, and I know that that's already going to spur up a lot, right? But saying and hearing those things, it seems like that this is a ownership that wants a front office that's going to come in and be very aggressive about approving the Chicago Bulls very fast, very early, and very intentionally. And so we're going to see if that ends up happening. Right now, you can only do so much based off who and what is willing to come to your team, the options that are ahead of you. The first step is the NBA draft. If you get the number 1 overall pick, what does that mean? If you get a top 4 pick, what does that mean? If you stay at number 9, what does that mean? If you fall some in the draft to number 12, 13, what does that mean, right? That's what this is ultimately coming down to for the Chicago Bulls is, that draft piece first, which I do think is why the Chicago Bulls are going to move very quickly on this. I don't know if you want it in place by the draft lottery because the draft lottery is out of your control. You show up somebody to represent the draft lottery anyway. The person just sits there. They get the envelope. They take a picture with it at the end. But by the NBA draft, they're going to want long before that, probably a month to 6 to 8 weeks before the NBA draft. You want your front office in place, right? Now, the assistant GM is still in place. The scout department is still in place, so they're still going to have that information to give to whoever the new guy is. But if you want to redirect your scout some, if you want to, understand it through the draft combine, you need to have the right eyes in the draft combine, right? So that is what the first stage of this is. Get the NBA draft. And to get to that, you have to first hire your front office. So they're going to cast a wide net. That's what Michael Reinsdorf reiterated. There will be a very wide net cast. They're going to interview a lot of people, as they should. And then they'll ultimately make the best decision that's there for their team. So what is this new era going to look like for the Bulls? I think it's going to be a draft-first approach. Michael talked a lot about having, all your draft picks, and he reiterated that multiple times. Also building around youth. He talked about Noah Essengane, saying that's like adding, a top 10 pick next year, which, that's speak. You got Montes Buzelis, right? So you have that young piece. What I'm more interested to see is that how the new GM feels about the vets, right? Because, I know everybody's like, none of these players are staying. The way that bird rights and stuff work, you're probably going to end up keeping 1 or 2 of the guys that's expiring this year, whether it's Colin Sexton, Nick Richards, or Zach Collins, whoever else it is. But what do they do with Trey? What do they do with Jalen? What do they do with Isaac Okoro? Like, what do they do with that? And I think that answer also changes some based on if Billy Donovan's here or not. Because, again, if the ownership is telling whoever's new coming in, saying, we don't want you to get rid of Billy, Billy's going to have his players that he has an affinity for. And I think Billy understands the importance of having a point guard to run the system. So what does that mean for Josh Giddey? But the draft first approach is going to be there. Developing meaningfully over time seems like that's what they want to do. And they do not want to try to rush this process. They want to see the process through, but at the same time, they want to see forward progress in actually making steps towards being an actual contender. And how they hold that accountable, I guess, is what we'll end up seeing in all of this, right? So it's just it's a new era, and I'm not going to act like it's not new. And, depending on the thing that I always say, and I'm still going to hold true to, it's not as much about ownership as the person that's running the day-to-day. And it's up to whoever they hire as the president, at the GM, who's going to be making the basketball decisions. You got to have somebody in that role that cares more about winning, team building, and being smart and successful over anything else. If you get somebody in that door, in that position that puts winning first, that is willing to do whatever it takes, which means controversial trades, being aggressive in free agency, being aggressive about combining assets, whatever it is, you have to have somebody that does that prioritizes that first if you want to get out of the basketball purgatory that we're in. Michael Reinsdorf talked about being in the middle. They don't want to be in the middle. They don't settle for being in the middle. I want to see that. right? I want to feel that because based off what I've seen as a fan of this franchise my whole entire life, I haven't seen a lot of that. So now go out there and show us. And if you show it, people are going to have to believe it because you're showing it with your actions. You're showing it with the way that you execute. You're showing it with those things. Go out there and show. You did the talking part. I'm glad that Michael Reinsdorf addressed the media. I'm glad that he addressed the fan base. I'm glad that he got out in front of it, right? Because we haven't seen a lot of that from the Reinsdorfs, no matter what the situation or how dire the situation is. We have not seen a lot of that. So great. You got that. Now, go out there and actually do the right moves, make the right steps, those type of things, to actually giving us what you claim that this fan base deserves, and that is a winning franchise that puts it all out on the line. So let's see what's going to happen there. But at the end of the day, this was a big moment for the franchise. But the real question is, are they actually turning the page, or are they just rewriting the same story again? And that's the biggest question there. Let me know how you guys feel down in the comment section. Do you trust another reset for the Chicago Bulls team? And do you think that Michael Reinsdorf is going to do what it takes to get the right guys in this building? Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel as well. Hit that notification bell if you never want to miss an episode, especially as we're going into the offseason. You guys can follow us at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullscentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.